When I worked at a top literary agency evaluating queries and at an imprint of Penguin Random House evaluating submissions from literary agents, I saw the same issue time and time again. The manuscript isn't actually ready yet. It's important to take time up front to make the manuscript as strong as it can possibly be before it ever hits an agent's inbox. Literary agents receive hundreds of manuscripts per week and are looking for polished manuscripts that have high potential to sell to a publishing house. And what's typically easier to sell? A turnkey home or a fixer-upper? Agents rarely offer representation to authors based on potential alone. Their execution must be strong. But how do you know if your book is truly ready or not? It can be so hard to tell. As a developmental editor who has helped authors get out of the querying trenches and sign deals with Big Five houses, I created a checklist of 5 questions to ask yourself to determine if your manuscript is really ready to put in front of agents. If you answer yes to all of these questions, I'd say go ahead and query with confidence. Here's the first question to ask yourself, and it's something that many writers don't think about until it's far too late in the writing process. Is my hook compelling? Many writers spend time refining their plot, developing their characters, and perfecting their prose, then declare the story done and send it off to agents. All of these elements are critical, but sometimes authors spend too much time focusing on the trees that they fail to see the entire forest. Having a compelling story premise is just as important as strong execution. With so many other books, TV shows, movies, and other forms of entertainment all vying for your reader's attention, what's going to make someone pick up your book and spend hours with it? Agents and publishers are asking themselves the very same question when considering your book. I know it can feel cheap to distill your complex, intricately woven story into a simple hook. But a strong hook isn't just a marketing trick. It helps you clarify your story's true conflict and stakes. It allows you to identify that differentiating factor that sets your book apart from all the others on the shelf. Let's look at an example. A weak hook would be something like, an aging screenwriter struggles to revive his career. It's so vague and unspecific. Who would want to read that? It might be the most beautifully written book in the entire world, but a boring hook will prevent readers from ever picking it up to begin with. A better hook would be, an aging screenwriter gets the opportunity to revive his career when his seminal project from 50 years ago goes viral on TikTok. Here are some killer hooks from well-known bestsellers. A lone astronaut wakes up millions of miles from home with no idea who he is or what he needs to do to save humanity. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. On a desert planet, a young nobleman must navigate deadly political battles to harness the power of a mysterious spice that could change the fate of the universe. Dune by Frank Herbert. If you haven't found your book's hook yet, try to do it right now. Describe the premise of your book in one enticing sentence. If you can't, think hard about what that differentiating factor of your book is, and then bring that forward in both your query and the manuscript itself. I have another deep dive video about strategies to find your book's hook, so check that out if you're struggling with it. Now, the next question to determine if you're really ready to query is going to force you to be brutally honest with yourself. Have I worked on my craft? No matter what you hear, you do not need an MFA or any formal writing credentials to get traditionally published. Many famous authors never took a single creative writing class. Writing is a discipline that you can self-teach, learn by doing. But if you're querying literary agents, you do need to be honest with yourself and evaluate if your writing is on par with the writing of traditionally published books. If the quality isn't there yet, your book simply isn't ready, even if the story idea is the best in the world. That doesn't mean you can't get your writing there, though. What I love about the craft of writing is that you can always improve. Here are some ways to sharpen your writing skills, most of which are totally free. First is watching YouTube writing lessons, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. Check out my library of different craft resources, and there are so many amazing writing-focused channels out there. You can also consider taking writing workshops, either virtual or in person. You can read craft books. Some of my absolute favorites are Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody and Story Genius by Lisa Cron. Studying storytelling structure and technique will completely change how you think about crafting your story from the ground up. And the very best way to grow in your writing, read more. Read widely, inside your genre and outside your genre. Read classics and recent bestsellers. Pay attention to what published authors are doing, how they approach their pacing, how they develop their characters, how they deliver a satisfying ending. Remember that developing in your craft as an author doesn't just mean perfecting grammar rules or learning how to construct beautiful sentences. You also must master the art of storytelling. That brings me to the next question. Your manuscript isn't ready to query yet if it doesn't deliver a powerful reading experience from beginning to end. So ask yourself, is my story emotionally moving? Remember all the controversy surrounding the ending of the TV series Lost? I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but many viewers thought that the ending was a cop-out and didn't answer the questions that they were desperately seeking answers to over the buildup of 6 seasons. That deep frustration is exactly what your readers feel when you don't stick the landing. If you have a weak, unsatisfying ending, it'll feel like all of the emotional investment we gave your story was for nothing. I saw this all the time when I worked in publishing. A story would have a gripping premise, and the tension would build so well leading up to the climax, only for the story to fall apart in the final act. In most cases, this would move a manuscript from the maybe pile into the rejection pile. It's true that if an agent felt very strongly about your story, they may offer a revise and resubmit, where they would tell you what issues they had with it and then encourage you to requery them with a revised draft. But ideally, we want to get ahead of all of that before you even submit it to them. Make sure we care about the characters, make us invested in the journey they go on, and make sure the ending pays off. A strong ending feels both inevitable yet genius. It should tie up all loose ends and feel earned, delivering a cathartic emotional experience. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have a happy ending. Tragic endings can be just as powerful. And even if your final scene is open-ended, your story should still feel complete. Ultimately, the final sentiment should feel true to the story you're telling and move the reader in some way. If your gut is telling you something might not be working with your ending, trust it, because readers will be able to tell if something is off. A great way to diagnose issues in your ending and in your story in general is reverse outlining. This is where you summarize every scene in your story after you've written it. The outline should reflect the draft as it currently stands. Then, once you have that reverse outline, track your protagonist's arc. Do all the choices they make over the course of the story ladder up to the climax and then the ending? Do they change meaningfully over the course of the novel? Also look out for your subplots or secondary storylines. Do you resolve all of these in a satisfying way, or do you leave anything hanging? Don't rush to query until you've resolved all of those issues. Now, your answer to this next question might make or break your shot with agents. Have I taken editorial feedback to heart? Here's the truth. You're too close to your own story to see its flaws. Every writer has blind spots, and even the most famous authors have trusted editors to catch their own. They know that after spending months or years with a manuscript, you start to miss things. That's why external feedback is so critical. Agents don't expect a perfectly polished manuscript, but they do expect you to make it as strong as you possibly can. And that means leaning on people whose feedback you trust to show you things you can't see for yourself. That could be beta readers, a critique partner, or even a professional editor, depending on your needs and goals. It is not required for you to pay to get feedback to get traditionally published, but remember that feedback is only as good as the person who's giving it. Make sure the person that you solicit feedback from understands what you're trying to accomplish with your story and has the skills needed to give you constructive feedback. But it's one thing to get feedback, and another thing entirely to listen to that feedback and know how to implement it and create a stronger story. If multiple people have pointed out the same issue, maybe your pacing drags in the middle, or maybe your protagonist feels underdeveloped, then you should seriously consider it. And chances are it's a problem you should address. A good way to test if you fixed it, ask your readers again. If they feel your changes resolved the issue, you've done a great job. If you have a new reader read the manuscript and they don't even bring up that issue at all, that's also a great sign. I'm not saying you have to take every single piece of feedback you receive. You shouldn't. Writing is subjective, and you should stay true to your vision for the book first and foremost. If a piece of feedback would take your story in a direction you simply don't want to go, throw it aside. But before doing that, hear your readers, your critique partner, or your editor out. Their goal is to help you tell the best version of this story. Many times, there might be a solution that doesn't compromise your vision for the book and solves the issue that they pointed out. Finally, the last question to ask yourself to determine if you're ready to query is also the most important one. Do I feel confident in the story? At the end of the day, this is your book. Your name will be on the cover. So ask yourself honestly, does this story live up to the idea I had in my head? Am I genuinely proud to share this with someone? Sometimes, deep down, you know there's still work to be done. You're not sure if a certain subplot is working, or you know that you rushed the climax. You know in your gut that the book could be better, but you're tempted to send it off to agents anyway and just be done with it. If you feel this way, even a little bit, pause right now. Here's what to do instead. Write down what still feels unresolved. What areas of your story are you still unsure about? Try to pinpoint them as concretely as possible because that's the only way you're going to be able to fix them. Then look at past feedback. Do any of your current concerns align with things others have pointed out already? Now, keep working on the manuscript until those issues get resolved. I promise it's going to be worth it. And if you feel too deep in the weeds to sort out those issues right now, take a break from the manuscript. Sometimes that's exactly what you need to return to it with fresh eyes. Now, I'm talking about making substantial changes to the story. If you're just tweaking minor things, like a character's last name, or you're deciding whether or not you want to have chapter titles, you might either be ignoring larger issues or just procrastinating. If you're just fine-tuning for the sake of it and you feel good about every other aspect of the manuscript, chances are it's time to let your perfectionism go and send it out. You probably feel nervous by the prospect of sending out your manuscript to literary agents. That's totally normal. But if you mostly feel excited about it and confident in what you've produced, then that's a good sign you're ready for the next step. And here's something important to remember. Once you send your manuscript out to agents, that doesn't mean you're done refining it. Many agents will give you editorial suggestions after you sign with them to help improve your chances of getting a book deal. And then once you land a book deal, you will go through rounds of edits with your publisher. So the goal of this phase is not to make your manuscript 100% perfect. It's to take your manuscript as far as you can on your own, so it's that much closer to the finish line when agents receive it. If you're able to do that, I promise you will be far ahead of the majority of authors who query way before their manuscript is actually ready. Before sending out your next queries, check your manuscript against my story self-assessment worksheet. It's a list of all the things I evaluate in manuscripts as a developmental editor and will help you pinpoint what could be improved in yours. Download it for free at the link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.